when we turn inward, I think we are all amazingly brilliant human beings who have unlimited potential, much of which is untapped. And no matter what your circumstances are, if you can't change your external conditions, you can certainly change your internal conditions. And that is one of the things that writing can do reliably and consistently, is help us understand ourselves, our lives, our relationships, our world better and more proactively.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the channel. Today I have a very special guest, Kathleen Adams, and I'm going to introduce Kay to you by reading out her bio, because there's no way I'm going to remember everything she's done. So here is the list. Who is Kathleen Adams? She is one of the most prominent and established voices in the field of therapeutic writing. She's a best-selling author, a speaker, and a psychotherapist. She's the founder and director of the Center for Journal Therapy, the premier source of education and training on the power of writing for healing, growth, and change. She's also the director of the Therapeutic Writing Institute and adjunct faculty at the University of Denver, where she teaches a 10-week course called Writing and Healing. In an internet poll, Kay was listed with Anne Frank and Anais Nin as one of the 3 most significant influences on contemporary journal keeping. The list goes on and on. And I didn't know Kay before I read her book. I read her book, Journal to the Self, and I also recorded a video here on YouTube and a podcast, if you're listening to the podcast, where I talk about that book, Journal to the Self. It was published in 1990, and I loved it. And I decided to get in touch with Kay and ask if she wanted to come here on my little channel to talk about why we should journal. So I asked her, for example, what is journaling? What are some misconceptions that we have about journaling? When should we journal? When we're happy, when we're sad? How should we journal? Should we keep a digital journal or a notebook? I asked her what journaling techniques are there. In her experience, how did she help some of her patients through journaling? I asked her, how can we become better writers by journaling? All these things, all things about journaling, the power of writing, the power of getting our ideas, our thoughts onto a page, digital page, or on a notebook. What effect does that have on our mind? Well, I think I couldn't have invited a better speaker than Kay Adams. And I hope you will enjoy this conversation. Check the show notes or the description of this video, because there is a free gift from Kay. Check it out. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Get ready now. It's story time. Kay, welcome. It's such a privilege to be here with you today and talk about your favorite topic and also one of my favorite topics. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Fabio. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to speak with you and your audience.
So, Kay, you're an expert about journaling. You've studied the topic for many years, and I discovered you through your book. And now let's start from the basics. What is journaling? How would you define journaling?
I define journaling as a written record of your life, a life-based document that can contain any aspect, your outer life, what you're doing that day, who you're engaged with, what's happening, your inner life, like how are you feeling and why are you, what's stressing you right now and what are you celebrating? The journal can be a lifelong document, or it can be a specific friend in need when things are tough or when you're struggling. But in my work, what I find is that it's a unique and individual style for each person. There is no wrong way to do this. I often tell my students and clients, no wrong, just right, WRITE. So when you give yourself the permission, and that's one of the really key factors, I think, to success in a journal relationship, is permission to do it or not do it, to do it some days and not others, to write when you feel like it and not when you don't. When you develop a pattern of writing, even occasionally, there is a relationship that is built over time, and that relationship is enduring.
So would you say that because when I journal, I tend to do it only when I struggle, when I'm frustrated, when I'm angry, or when something is troubling me for some reason. Should we, I don't know if should is the right word, but okay, should we do it even though we're not struggling with anything? Because you said, okay, it may be a life companion, like a friend, when in times of during hard times, but why should we do it when we're happy, when we don't have any problems, immediate problems?
Well, sometimes when you're happy is the very best time to write something down, because when you can document joy or pleasure or excitement or success or pride in an accomplishment, that anchors it in. And there's been one of my colleagues, Deborah Ross, is a brilliant journal therapist who has combined writing with neuropsychology. She has studied extensively the neuroplasticity literature and research and effects. And what she has found in her work is that when you write in a specific pattern, I mean, her premise is that journal writing can become a form of self-directed neuroplasticity. So we can actually change our brains using writing in a specific way. And the reason I mention that is because one of the things that is the most helpful and productive in enhancing positive brain change is when you write down things that are pleasurable, joyful, successful, when you write down the good news as well as the bad news, because that anchors into your brain a pathway that starts to form for, I am successful, I can do this, I have resilience, I got through a hard time. So we talked about permission just a minute ago, about how it's important to just give yourself permission. Another one of the cardinal theses I have is that balance in the journal is another very strong indicator of lifelong or ongoing success. Balance means that, and there's nothing wrong with turning to a journal when you're struggling. That is common. A lot of people do it. That's the only time they write, is when they're trying to get through a difficult time. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's, congratulations, you are doing self-care in a way that can help you manage a hard experience. When you balance that with little moments of joy, and it doesn't take a lot of light to light up quite a bit of darkness. The ratio between, the match and the darkness is, doesn't take much light to illuminate. And so just little pockets of joy from now and then. We have a technique called captured moments, which is a sensory-based write that focuses on the what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you touching? What's touching you? What are the scents and the aromas? When you bring in all of the sensory input into a little vignette, 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe one paragraph of a sunrise or a beautiful painting or any moment of joy or beauty, that brings balance to the journal, and it lets you know that you are more than just the challenges that you face. You also have the capacity for strength and resourcefulness, and that's also in your journal.
What's the science behind, because journaling is about writing, so we write, or can it also be
Yes.
an audio
Well,
journal?
it can be audio journaling. Some people don't like their handwriting, or some people sometimes people just walk around with talking into their phone on an app or recording it in some other way. A lot of people keep art journals, and if you're artistic, art can be a really great way to show and hide at the very same time. You're making a picture of a tree, but is that a picture of a tree, or is that a picture of, how you feel unrooted right now? There's a lot of ways to write that don't involve cursive handwriting or keyboarding. So we can bring in other modalities as well. But yeah, for the most part, writing is done either by hand or by keyboard. It doesn't really matter. So some of the research about why writing heals, almost all of the research scientifically that we have in the field originates from the work of one man, Dr. James Pennebaker, who is the preeminent research psychologist in this field. In the early 1980s, he started doing studies with college students. He was a professor at a university in Texas, still is, different university. But Dr. Pennebaker asked his college freshmen in intro to psychology to participate in an extra credit project. And he had 2 groups, a test group and a control group. The control group was asked to write about benign topics. They chose topics from a list that were, pretty much non-intrusive, just kind of normal kinds of things that they might write about. The test group was asked to write in a particular pattern 4 consecutive days, 15 to 20 minutes at a time, in a room in the university with a proctor, a teaching assistant, or someone who was monitoring the room. They would come in, they were asked to write for the entire 4 days. They were asked to write about something that was very painful for them and they had a hard time talking about. So this might have been something they experienced in childhood that was very scary. It could have been abuse of some type. It could have been, a really bad breakup with their first boyfriend or girlfriend. But they were asked to write specifically about something that they didn't easily disclose to anyone else, either because it was shame-based or they didn't know how to approach it. It didn't matter. So the first day they wrote about the story, just like, what's the story of this? Just tell the story. And write about what happened to you and include both facts and feelings, both content and the emotions that arose from the content. They turned in their paper at the end of 15 or 20 minutes, and the proctor put it in a locked box, and nobody ever saw it except the researchers. The second day, they came back, and the assignment was to write more of that story, to keep the same theme, but to add in details, add in layers, add in things that they didn't usually think about when they thought about this story, like who else was involved or what was happening in the world around them that may have impacted their feelings. The third day, they were asked to write about how this experience had impacted their life as they are living it today. What do they move toward? What do they move away from? How do they manage this secret that they have? And then on the last day, the assignment was to synthesize your writing to this point so far. Have you noticed any shifts in your thinking? Are you ready to take a step forward into something that you haven't been able to do before? Are you ready to release something? Again, no one ever processed any of this with the students. They didn't have any feedback. They didn't get therapy. Nothing happened. And the results were that immediately after, well, not immediately, but within 24 hours after the last day of writing, they had biological markers taken, blood work and other lab tests, and the researchers discovered that there was an immediate increase in immune system functioning after the fourth day of writing, and that increase in immune system protection lasted for up to 6 weeks. They also followed both the test group and the control group at the campus health center for the next 6 months. And they discovered that the students in the group that wrote about their difficulties, as opposed to benign topics, had fewer visits to the health center for stress-related illnesses, and that benefit lasted for up to 6 months. So the very first
Wow.
studies looked at the physiological markers and the way that writing can, in fact, demonstrably reduce stress-related responses. Dr. Pennebaker has gone on to do much more intensive research and much more sophisticated research, and his model, what is now called the Pennebaker paradigm, is used by, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of researchers around the world for all kinds of problems, health problems. There's like a bunch of cancer studies, all kinds of different cancer, fibromyalgia, eating disorders, wound healing after surgery is improved. There was one study, this was really a great study, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which in the United States is like, the really highly revered publication that all of the doctors, rely on. And that journal published a study by researchers who used this four-part write on two different audiences, rheumatoid arthritis sufferers and separately asthma sufferers, put them through the protocols, and they measured the outcomes by the participants' doctors' response to their symptom reduction. So they asked the doctors before and after, what are the symptoms? What are the severity of symptoms that these arthritis and asthma sufferers are having? And then after the write, they asked the doctors the same question over time. And it turned out that 47% of the physicians interviewed on behalf of their patients said that there was, I don't remember the exact word they used, but significant symptom reduction in their diseases after 4 days of writing. Actually, it was only 3 days, and over time, it's been kind of truncated down to a 3-day process. So there was an editorial in the same journal that said, that was reporting on this study, and that medical doctor said, if these results had been published about a new drug, it would likely be in widespread use within a short time. So there is health benefits to writing. And it doesn't have to be in this particular format. This happens to be a pretty good standard to follow, but it's not the only way to do it. It's like I've known Dr. Pennebaker for many years, and several times in our conversations, I have said, if 4 days of writing is this good, what happens, do you think, if people write for 4 weeks or 4 months or 4 years or 40 years? What might the health benefits be on that? And he says, oh, gosh, Kay, that would be a great study. You should do that study. And I'm like, no, I want you to do the study because you're the researcher. But he won't. He's happy with the results that he's had, and he leaves it to the people like me and you to educate other people on the benefits of writing over a longer period of time. But I know what has happened in my life. I mean, I've been a lifelong journal writer since I was 10 years old. And I can tell the difference between how I am emotionally regulating when I am regularly writing, which for me can be once a week or 3 times a day. Regular is a very open field for definition. I have clients and colleagues who write 1 entry a month, and it's usually at the end of the month when they review the whole month. So, that's a valid way to keep a journal. So there's a lot of healing benefits, and there's emotional healing benefits as well. People who have the opportunity to purge, whatever is on their mind, have put it in a place where it can be safely retrieved, but it's no longer in their body. Now it's externalized on the page. And I'll just ask you a question, Fabio, if I may. When you write about struggles, I mean, you said you mostly write when you're upset about something. How does it help you?
Well, it's a great way to, as you've just said, to let it out, like to get rid of this negative feeling that I have. And my last entry was just a page full of insults. I don't know if that's a good way to
that's interesting.
to do it. Like square words, a mix of English and Italian. And after that page, I felt good. Because, I couldn't say it out loud.
Yeah.
And,
exactly.
It doesn't mean, what I wrote doesn't mean anything. Like, it's just a sequence of insults, as I said. But, I can see the health benefits, the mental benefits in this case. So this is one way. It's not that I journal in this way all the time. Yeah.
No, but I think that's an outstanding example, because a page of insults, you can be as socially inappropriate as you want to be in your journal because, and here's a big thing, if you are protecting your own privacy and you are taking steps so that someone will not accidentally or intentionally come across it, then you have free reign to be just as nasty, as insulting, as that's cathartic. It is getting it out of your body, out of your mind, onto the page, and the page will receive it and hold it in confidence silently until you want it again, or until you decide that you're done with it. And, you might rip it out of your journal and tear it up in pieces and jump on it, or wad it up in a big ball and say, here's to you, and just stomp on it a while. And that's a great cathartic release. And you have hurt no one, and you have helped yourself. And you've helped all the people that you're insulting because you're not spewing it at them. So I don't recommend a steady diet of that, because it can get counterproductive. I mean, this is where balance came in. If all you ever did was what my friend Deborah, who I spoke about, the neuroplasticity lady, she calls that raging on the page. And raging on the page is great if you're filled with rage. But if you are habituating rage, then that's something you might want to take a look at and say, wasn't there something nice that happened to me today? Or um, my default in this situation, what I recommend to people is beauty. Write about beauty through your senses. And not everybody agrees what is beautiful, but everybody knows what is beautiful to them. I had a client one time. He was a really great guy, but he was severely depressed, just really severely depressed. And he didn't like to write, and that's okay. I don't require that people write when I'm working with them as a therapist. But he had a high-tech job in a high-rise building in downtown Denver, and he worked on one of the upper floors, so he had a great view of the city from his window. And I asked him what he thought was beautiful, and he didn't know what he thought was beautiful. And so we went all through nature. Do you like animals? Do you like trees? Nothing. And I said, well, when you look out your window, what do you see? And I didn't mean his office window. I was just, whatever. And he said, I see the on-ramp to the freeway, and it is the most beautiful arc. And I said, you see that from your window at the office? And he said, yes. And I said, what happens when you look at it? And he said, I feel calm. I feel peaceful. And I said, great. Could you write about that, highway ramp, that on-ramp? He actually he only wrote a paragraph, but the paragraph he wrote was so tender and moving and beautiful about a concrete on-ramp to a highway. But to him, it was beautiful. And so that became part of our therapy. When you start really getting into a spiral when you're at work, just go gaze at the on-ramp, just go look at that and tell yourself a story about it. And that one anchor of beauty helped him. It really did. It sounds silly, but he only wrote about it once, but that was enough.
And do you think, this is fascinating. I'm thinking, is it because when we engage with writing, with journaling, with doodling, when we engage with our own thinking, is it that brings the benefits? Because you said you can write, but you can also, use an app and audio record yourself.
Yeah.
Is it because we are engaging with our own thoughts, and this is something that we normally don't do because we're busy thinking about other things? I don't know if you know anything about the science of this.
I think that's a very good question, and I'm not a real sciencey person. Deborah is our resident research girl, but my observational experience and my work with clients is that we have most of us have habits in the way that we think and the way that we process. We have, stress responses to specific signals or stimulus. We have joy responses when, predictable things happen. And a lot of us have a running dialogue in our head with our inner critic or our inner, jerk, who's telling us you're not good enough, you're not doing that well, who do you think you are, why did you do that, you're never going to make it. And that's just part of the negativity bias of the brain. It's just like when we were, Deborah always says back in the olden days, our prehistoric ancestors didn't have a whole lot to think about, the meaning of life. They were wondering if they were going to have lunch or be lunch. And so the negativity bias of, I have to keep myself safe because the world is full of monsters and, dinosaurs and big animals that wildebeests that will eat us. That part of our brain is still there. And so we are looking for ways to interrupt that cycle not consciously always, but writing something down gets it out of our heads and onto a neutral space where we can observe our own thinking and our own feeling. And I think there is something meditative almost, something soothing about the rhythm of writing, whether you're keyboarding or writing by hand. Some people do not like to write by hand, and keyboarding is completely valid. I did a study with two other people, a psychologist, or not a psychologist, a woman who has a research background, and a friend who is a leader in some men's programs. And he did a 30-day digital journaling study, in which he invited, a whole bunch of people. There were 4,000 people that actually joined this study worldwide. That was just, how to write a journal on your phone, on an app, whatever. So it was 30-day challenge, and there were prompts every day. And, I asked if we could do a research study on it, because there was not only this vast number of people doing digital journaling all at once, but there was a remarkable number of men in the study. And the gap between women who write journals and men who write journals is big. It's really big.
More women.
Most women more women than men start writing a journal. I mean, women who write journals at midlife typically started when they were in, their preteen or teen years, or or college years, but during their adolescence sometime. In this study, like 60% of the women had started writing a journal in that era before they graduated from college. And 2% of the men had. And most of the men had started writing within the last 3 years of the study, which was in 2015. So we asked all kinds of questions. Do you write by hand or on the computer? Are you comfortable writing by hand or by the computer? Do you get what kind of outcomes do you get when you're working with emotional issues, with work related, we just asked a ton of questions. And there was no significant difference at all between how people who wrote by hand and people who wrote digitally reacted to, both methods work equally in terms of, do you get good outcomes? Another study, or another thing we looked at, was whether people were comfortable writing digitally. And women and men were almost equal in their comfort level, very comfortable or comfortable writing on a device, writing on a, digitally writing. I think the men were like at 91% and the women were at 89%, or maybe it was 93 and 91. It was very close, and it was high. But when you ask the same question about handwriting, there was a 19% gap. The women were equally comfortable writing by hand as they were. In fact, they were a little bit more comfortable writing by hand than digitally, but men dropped off, and there was a 19-point gap between men who said they were comfortable or very comfortable writing by hand. And that all by itself, I don't know what the makeup of your audience is, but if there are men listening to this, please don't hesitate to get an app or to write on your phone or to write, in a Word document or however you want to do it. There's nothing wrong with that, and you can get absolutely the same results when you're writing.
How do you know if
device?
How do you know if a journaling session has worked or not? Like you as a journaler, like I'm journaling. Okay, how do I know if this session was beneficial or not? Like,
Yeah.
because sometimes I start and then I'm like, I'm not going anywhere here, and then I feel, okay, I've wasted 5-10 minutes of my time because I haven't found a solution maybe to a problem,
That's a great
or yeah.
That is a fabulous question, and I have an answer for it, and I'm really glad you asked. One of the things that I rely on a lot is what we call the reflection right. The reflection right happens at the end of a journal entry. So say you've written for 5 or 10 minutes and you don't know if you got anywhere. Just, put your pen down, or, take your fingers off the keyboard and take a deep breath and read back what you just wrote, and read it through, the lens of curiosity. What happened here? And then drop down a line or two and write a reflection. As I read this, I notice, or I'm surprised by, or I didn't realize, or whatever follows organically. As I read this, I note, I'm curious about, I wonder, I feel, I think. And that harvests insight and clarity in 1 or 2 sentences. And when you read back and reflect on it, it often suggests a next step. So you might want to take it into a next step and say, something I could do now to advance this, or to integrate this, or to synthesize, or whatever, to take action. Action orientation is one of the things that is available to us in the journal that we don't always take advantage of. It's like, I really think I should just, after your page of insults, which I love, by the way, I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to write a page of insults. After you have written your page of insults and read it back, as I read this, I feel kind of silly, or I feel relieved, or I feel light. Then ask yourself the journal question, is there a next step I can take? Because what I'm always wanting to help people have is a path to greater peace of mind. And the journal can also be used as a planning device. You can do a lot of really cool things with intentionally positioning yourself to have a successful experience. If you have a goal of, I don't know, what's something you want to be doing in about 6 months from now? Is there a vacation you want to take, or something you want to study, or something you want to 6 months to a year? Is there that you
6
can
months
talk
to a year.
about?
I want to start writing. I want to start writing another book.
Okay, great. That's a perfect example. So give us a timeline. 6 months, 9 months, a year? When would you like to be in process with this?
As soon as I finish my master's dissertation, so I should be let's say 6 months.
Okay, 6 months. Okay, so 6 months from now, this is July, so 6 months is going to be what, January or so? So maybe you could do a New Year's, so date your page 6 months from now, or January 1st, or January, what is today? Whatever 6 months from now is, just date your page and jump time and imagine that you are writing your next book and you've got it started and you're in the zone. So write as if you were having a successful experience with your book at whatever stage you envision it to be in 6 months. And then just kind of like, wow, this is so cool. I have started my book. It's going really well. I'm super excited about it. I'm telling people about it, and they're really eager for it to come out. And here's how I got here. The very first thing I did 6 months ago was I decided I was going to set a deadline, and then I did. And then I kind of mapped out, it's like I didn't have time to do it then, but I was really mindful of how I might approach it. And so I just started taking some notes about that. And then before I knew it, I was telling people on my podcast about it, and they were starting to give me feedback. And I mean, just like imagine what your best path might be, and then you have a roadmap to your own success. Now, not all of it is probably going to play out the way you wrote it in your fantasy, right? But you have articulated. The most important thing about it is not magical thinking that you write it down and it's going to, kind of poof, come true. It is more about recognizing the options and the choices that you could make, and then making discerning choices about what you do between now and then to get to that place. So you're kind of like working back, retrofitting, reverse engineering your success. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. I'm just thinking, I can picture some of my friends doing something like this and think, this is just a silly thing. A silly thing,
Well,
because it's not going to happen. It's not. Why am I doing this? So it's all fantasy, as you said, writing. And this is also another question that maybe it's related to the other question that I wanted to ask you. I feel that some people have misconceptions about the utility, the what journaling can bring to their lives, because it's just some men, as you said, they might feel, well, this is just a thing. What is it? A diary? Am I in first grade now? So what are some misconceptions, and how can we what's the verb, eradicate, like how can we get rid of these misconceptions for someone who's never journaled, or someone who has never tried, or yeah.
That is a valid question, and I get that all the time from people, clients that I'm working with. When I say, why don't you just jump time and do a 1 year from today or 6 months from today, they say, that's just, that's nonsense. And that is my signal to back away and say, okay, well, let's leave that, for another time. Cancel that. Let's talk about how we might approach it in a different way, because there's no point in forcing yourself to do something that feels silly or awkward or non-productive. So like I have a bunch of different techniques. This one is called perspectives, the one that I just talked about, and it is specifically, and the perspectives technique is anytime you're writing from a different perspective, either into the future, into the past, regressing yourself into the past, which I don't really recommend very often, and or you can change voice. So another way of writing a perspectives entry is to whoever it is that you were writing insults to, assume their voice and write what they might write in there. Well, that's too complicated. But the jumping time thing, the misconception here is that we can't have agency over our own futures. We can have agency over our own futures. And this is just a different way of goal setting. But goal setting can be kind of onerous. It can feel like work. It can feel like, oh, I'm obligated now, and I don't really want to do this work for goal setting, and I don't want to. But writing once a week about your progress toward a project is validation. It is helping you see that you can move forward, helping you notice when you are stuck, helping you identify the places where you are stuck, and if somebody wrote for 3 months, once a week, about a project that they were working on, and then they wrote a reflection in 1 or 2 sentences at the end of that, right? In 3 months, they would be able to simply read their reflection rights and see what the trajectory had been and what the thing had been. Other misconceptions, let's see. I have to know what I'm going to write about before I write about it. I think one of the things that happens with writing is it's perfectly fine to start with a topic that you want to write about. There's nothing wrong with that at all, and it's very organizing to do that. But then there's this kind of magical way that we go off into realms that we didn't know we were going to explore, and that can be very insightful and very interesting. My bias, having identified insightful as one of the things, my bias is that writing can provide us with useful internal signals about how we see the world and how we behave in the world and our relationships and everything else. And I am a big fan of insight. I like to know, I like those aha moments of, oh, I get it. I've been acting this way because I'm feeling that way. And if I were to change my feeling, maybe I could change my behavior, or maybe I could just stop doing what I'm doing and I'd feel better. So there's a lot of self-examination that goes on that is a part of an expressive writing journal or a therapeutic writing journal, but it doesn't always have to be therapeutic either. It can just be fun, like just maybe writing a journal about your garden in the summer, or the weekend trips you take, or just a journal about how your kids are growing, or there's just all kinds of ways. My sister, who has 6 children, and
Wow.
and they were all at various stages of toddlerhood and growing up, she used to write one journal entry a year because she was so busy raising kids. On the first day of school every year, even if her kids were still babies, she wrote a profile of each of her children on the first day of school every year for like 15 years. And that was the only journal she wrote, was, her annual first day of school journal. But it's in one book, and it's a leather-bound book. And those kids, when they were little, they read that book to shreds because they were so interested in their own lives and how they were described when they were younger and all that. That book is tattered now, and her kids are all grown, and she has grandkids. But that was, that's a prime example of a focused journal that you don't have to do regular. Well, she did it regularly. It was once a year. But that's, that's valid. It served the function. She captured what she wanted to capture.
I'm thinking, someone who wants to start, because sometimes I call it journalist block. So I have 10 minutes and I say, okay, now I'm going to write in my journal, and I open the page. It's a physical one. It's a like a notebook. And I think, okay, what should I write about? I don't, I'm happy in this moment. I don't have any particular questions, but I want to write something in my journal, and the blank page is there. And I'm sure that many other people who have never journaled would feel in the same way if they start today. What would you recommend? So just like write about something beautiful, or because it might feel, for some, may feel something that has no purpose. Write because I have to write. But I think that maybe if we have a goal in mind, maybe beginners at least would be more happy to start. I don't know if I structured my question in the right way. I hope you understood. If not, I'll rephrase it.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. And if I am understanding it correctly, if you have 10 minutes and a blank page, where do you start, or do you just stare at the page for 15 or 8 of the 10 minutes? So this is a technique that I call springboards, and it's like the springboard at a swimming pool or the diving board, where its function is to get you in the water. That's the only function it has, is to move you from, up there to in here. And the
Hmm.
springboard in the journal is a starting sentence or a question you might ask yourself. And what I recommend to people is that they, maybe on the last page of their journal, or if they're writing a digital journal, just on a separate, page of that file, to just brainstorm some starters, some questions. How do I feel today? What's the most important thing to do? That's a great question. What's the most
Hmm.
important thing to do right now? What's going on? That is a really generic question that will take you somewhere in 10 minutes. What's going on? I'm frustrated. I'm mad. I'm antsy. I feel like I'm going to jump out of my skin. I want coffee, but that'll just make me more caffeinated. That will evolve as it goes. That'll take up the first minute and a half. Then you have 8.5 more minutes to really kind of hone in on what's going on. So then ask yourself the question again: what's going on? What else is going on? These springboards, these little sentence starters, and by the way, I have a little ebook that I would like to offer to you and to your listeners, called J is for Journal. It's just a little acronym for, but it's got like 68 writing prompts in one ebook. And part of it is getting started. J
Hmm.
is for just start. And there's a whole little chapter on how to get started with a lot of these springboards in it. And O is for outside, inside. You can focus externally in your journal. You can look at the world around you, or you can look at the world within. And so there's prompts for external, outside yourself journal writing, and prompts for inside yourself journal writing. And it goes on from there. U is for unique. You don't have to do it anybody else's way. Just do it your own way. So that's, I think,
Hmm.
a little primer that might help people with
Yeah.
some of these sticky, gnarly questions about, well, what do I do? So that's the function of this little ebook, is to help you know what to do, how to get started. So I'd like to
Yeah.
offer
And
that
also
to you
your
if I could.
book. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yes.
Also your book that we're here because I read your book that you wrote in
I
1990,
know. Thank you
and
so much. I'm
still,
so
yeah,
appreciative that you offered it to your audience.
yeah, it's journal to the self, and you have 22 techniques there.
Yes.
And my favorite, I can tell you, is the list, the 100. I can't remember the exact name, but it's like you write a list of 100 items, and it's okay to repeat the item. For
Yes.
example, things that I'm afraid of. Okay, 100 things I'm afraid of, and you write. And I
Yes.
did that,
Yes. Uh-huh.
and I
Yeah.
discovered quite a lot of
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yes. Nice. Did you synthesize? Did you go back and categorize and
Yeah,
put them
I did
into
the color
buckets,
coding as
into
well.
categories? Yeah, and the color coding. Did you have any surprises? Did you find that what you're afraid of surprised you at all?
Not. I got confirmation. Like,
You got
okay, this
confirmation.
is what I'm
Yeah.
afraid of. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And then what did you do? Once you knew that, then what, did you
Hmm.
take another step?
No,
Okay.
I did nothing.
Yeah. Is there anything more to do with that? Maybe you were finished.
Hmm. Um. Well, for sure, it's good to know what you're afraid of. So,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, you're in charge, let's say, of your fear,
Yes. 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 You have.
because
Mhm.
you've acknowledged it. And no, it's just it's something that sometimes I get reminded of. Like, I think, yes, I behave like this because I'm afraid of that thing.
Yeah. Right. So the validation that came from spending the time and the energy and the brain power to write a list of 100. And I just want to say the list of 100 is, I think it's a marvelous technique. It's not for everybody because some people just find it, you know, nonsensical. But to write a list of 100, when you give yourself, this is really part of the structure, permission, as you said, to repeat, repeat, repeat. So if I'm writing a list of 100 things I want um, advanced in the next 3 days, and what I keep saying is, do your filing, do your filing, do your filing, 100 or 60 times out of 100, even though I hate doing my filing, that's pretty good indication that if I do my filing, something's going to happen that I will benefit from, or if nothing else,
Mm.
it'll just get my desk cleaned off. So, that's the beauty of it, is that when you allow yourself to repeat and you are writing fast and you are unhooking your brain and you are not thinking about it too much, just take the next thing that happens, then first of all, you can get through a list of 100 if you're writing like that in about 15, 18 minutes usually. And uh, then you can get a predominance of the evidence. And if you take action on that, which, you know, you took action by internalizing what it is that you're afraid of. And when you can name something, when you can name, this is my biggest thing that I'm afraid of, you can start to have a relationship with it. It begins to have a form and a shape, and you know what you're working with. And that's really powerful, to not have
Yeah.
this like free floating anxiety going around, but saying, I am really afraid of, you know, um, whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
really afraid of. And then you can start to befriend it and to have a relationship with it. And relationships change things. When you have a relationship with a stressor or a fear, um, you can open yourself up to having some compassion about it, seeing it from a different perspective. Um, I'm working on a program right now. I'm almost finished with it, um, called Stress Busting, which is, I think my tagline is, transform a stressor into an ally in one writing session. And the one writing session happens to be a 5-part writing session that takes about 30 minutes start to finish. Um, but it moves you through a process of identifying a fear or a stressor and coming into an imaginary, yes, but internal relationship with it. And people do find that when they have gone through this process, the way they felt at the beginning, which they have documented by writing down some feelings that they feel in the presence of this stressor, and how they feel at the end, which is another set of feeling words that describe how they feel at the end, typically goes something like scared, stressed, and anxious to empowered, curious, and liberated. And
Hmm.
that happens really routinely. And I want to make another point of that. Another way, you asked about how do we validate outcomes for ourselves. Another
Hmm.
thing you can do is, I am always trying to teach my clients that feelings are fickle. They change with time and process. Moods, a little more intractable. We don't shift our mood necessarily as quickly, but feelings come and go hundreds of times a day, all of us. And so when you are in distress or under stress, and you want to see if writing, or even if you're not, but especially when you're pretty charged coming into a writing session. If you write 3 words that describe how you're feeling, mad, sad, and scared, at the beginning of the entry, and then write your entry, and then read it back, and do your reflection, and write 3 more words or phrases that describe how you're feeling right then, you will have in your own writing or typing a contrast and comparison of where you were when you went in, where you are when you come out, and more times than not, you might be really surprised at how writing can change a feeling state in very little time.
Brilliant.
So
well, this is enough to do it.
Yeah, I would encourage you to explore that.
And also, because many of my listeners are writers.
Yes.
I found in a book called, I've talked about this book many times on my podcast, 100 Ways to Improve Your Writing. 100, so we've got the same number.
Yeah, right.
Number 2 is by Gary Provost, who was the author of more than 1,000 published stories, 2,000 books, fiction, non-fiction. He was a writing instructor. He says, I'm going to read out a page here. Number 2, keep a journal. This is one of the tips. Keep a journal. There is no one right way to keep a journal, he says, but if you have some sort of notebook or diary that you return to often with your written thoughts, opinions, observations, and various bits of wit, you will have a place in which to exercise your writing muscles. You will learn to describe succinctly and clearly the events of your daily life. You will learn to pluck from each event just the details needed to create a sense of the whole. If you keep a journal, you will grow as a writer, and you will find that sooner or later, no matter what you have to write professionally, your personal experiences will play a part. Do you have anything to add to this?
I think that is beautifully stated, and I think writers in particular, I mean, people who write, who know they are writers, can have a particular alliance and affiliation. I have written 14 books, and every single time I write a book, I get to a place where I have to ask the book what it wants to be, because I'm in the middle of the great big muddle, and I am throwing ideas on the page, and I don't really know what I'm writing about yet, and all that stuff. But when I have another journal technique that is really, really impactful, and this comes from the work of Ira Progoff, Progoff, Progoff. Dr. Progoff was a Jungian and depth psychologist in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And in the 60s, he developed this process that he called the intensive journal process. He started out calling it a psychological notebook, but then he named it the intensive journal process. It's very intensive, but one of the basic structures that he uses and teaches is the dialogue technique, which is a written conversation where you write both parts. And yes, you're making it up, but out of everything you could be making up, this is what you're making up. So there's all kinds of different types of dialogue, one of which is dialogue with works, which is your work or your career or your aspiration or your book, if you're writing a book, or your blog, if you're writing a blog. So I get to a point with every book where I have to sit down and have a dialogue with the book and say, tell me what you are. Tell me who you want to be. Give me a roadmap for, who are you and how can I best represent the essence of what you want to communicate? And that sounds very esoteric and abstract, and it is, but I then get really concrete information. The book says, well, you're kind of on the right track, but I think you're going a little bit sideways here. And my essential message really is, and I mean, we just have this conversation, and I'm writing the conversation. I'm not I'm not channeling something from an external source. This is all me, but it is a fresh way of tapping into the wisdom and knowledge that comes to all of us at depth. When we turn inward, I think we are all amazingly brilliant human beings who have unlimited potential, much of which is untapped. And no matter what your circumstances are, if you can't change your external conditions, you can certainly change your internal conditions. And that is one of the things that writing can do reliably and consistently, is help us understand ourselves, our lives, our relationships, our world better and more proactively. And I am all about empowerment. And I think a journal is one of the most empowering things someone can do for no cost, but the cost of paper
free.
and pen, or pixels. And I just, I have been a lifelong advocate, and I will continue to be a lifelong advocate until I die, and hopefully afterward, if my work lives on beyond me. And it's people like you, Fabio, who are taking it out into your own worlds, your own circles, and your own communities. And, my vision for this field, which was nascent in 1985 when I started. In 1985, when I started, I don't know how yoga is in Italy. Is yoga a thing in Italy?
It's a big thing. Yeah, it's a big thing.
In 1985, it was not found in every, hospital and rec center, and, there weren't studios where people could do this. Nobody really knew very much about yoga. They thought it was something weird. And now yoga is accessible everywhere, at least in the United States, and it's mainstreamed. And that's my vision for this field. I want journal writing to be as normalized and as accessible and as mainstream as yoga is by the time I leave the planet. And it's going to take all of us to do that. And one writer at a time, the message gets delivered. I think writing groups are a powerful way to write. And I have done a lot of my work, most of my work, well, not most, because I've done one-on-one work too, but I've done a significant amount of group work in writing over the years. And journal groups are magical. They just are. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, with this little interview, I think we are contributing to that mission.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing your
listen
part.
to you. Yeah. Thank you. It's been great. Thank you, Kay.
You're welcome. I am so honored to have been invited, and thank you so much for taking the voice of Journal to the South out into the world. I wrote that book it was published in 1990. So what is that, 34 years? God.
Yeah, and it's still making an impact.
I'm old. Yeah, it's still in print, and after 34 years, holy cow.
Thank you. I will put all the links in the show notes. Your all the the books that you mentioned, your work, and I want to thank you for what you've been doing since 1985. Your research, your writing. And I hope to see you in other, because I couldn't find many podcast interviews. I don't know if, I don't know, maybe this will be, you'll continue doing these things, because I think podcasting is great. Yeah.
Yeah, I have just started podcasting. I've just started being a podcast guest. So I haven't got them up on my website yet. But I've done this is, I think, my 8th podcast, which is not very many, but they're all different. They're all really wonderfully different. And, so I will send you some links to some of the things that I've done. Interesting.
Great. All right. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you very much. I really
in another
appreciate
episode,
it.
maybe.
I hope so.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're a writer and you want to improve your writing, or you want to keep improving your writing, consider joining my private email list, Better Writers. I send one short email every week. I share tips, insights, things that I learn, book recommendations to help you do one thing only: become a better writer. The link is in the show notes or in the description of this video. Thank you for listening once again. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.